Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Great to be with you on our journey through the Bible. Yes, it's Timoteo, your good amigo, on our journey. Our reading for today was in Matthew chapter 13 and 14. Of course, Matthew chapter 13 is the great parable chapter, one after another, and explains why Jesus told parables. And then in chapter 14, we get into another situation where the disciples are in trouble. And it's a good reminder that that's where we'll land today. I'd like to share a few thoughts with you about Matthew chapter 14. Because life has a way of throwing us into storms sometimes and into difficulty. And there are three things you need to remember when problems just seem to overwhelm your life, as it did with the disciples. And the first thing is, remember that your Lord is always in control if you're a believer in Jesus. Matthew 14:22 says, straightway Jesus constrained the disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrary. They just seen Jesus do the impossible. They had a long day of ministry. He fed 5,000 hungry men, plus their wives and their children, with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and a big miracle. And then they were ordered to cross the lake while the Lord prayed. And the word implies Jesus ordered them to go across the lake. He dismissed the crowd, and then he just wanted time to pray. That's why he was there in the first place. John the Baptist had just been killed, and they received word, and he just wanted to spend some time with the Father in prayer. And so they're the disciples. They're about 4 miles from shore at this point in the middle of the lake. But the Lord was in control of this whole situation, even while they're in the storm. He put them there, after all. He saw them there. It was Jesus' idea, launch out. And the fact that he ordered them to go tells me maybe they saw the weather report and it doesn't look like it was going to be too favorable with the wind blowing the way it was. But they obeyed. They got in the boat. But they were right in the center of their Lord's will, and yet they were still in this horrible storm. And the same thing can be true for you, my friend. You can be in the center of God's will for you and find your life is just a raging storm, but he is still God. And just like Jesus, he sees what's going on in your life. Maybe you're rowing as hard as you can. You're wondering if you got in the wrong boat. But my friends, your Lord is still in control. I want you to remember that when you're going through problems. Secondly, remember the Lord is near. And that's what we see in verses 25 to 29. In the 4th watch of the night, we read, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, and cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. The 4th watch on the night would be about between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So Jesus had been praying most of the night, and at least part of the time he was watching the progress of the disciples. He's probably praying for the disciples on this trip. But they saw Jesus walking on the water. They thought it was a ghost. And maybe for them that seemed more likely than to think that it was the Lord walking on the water. They saw a man walking on water, and based on their own senses, what they understood, that's not possible. It must be a spirit or a ghost. And that's when Peter jumps in and said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come. Proverbs tells us that we're snared by the words of our mouth, and Peter was. Once he said that, the Lord said, Come. He had no choice. He had to go. There are times when our storms are terrifying, and there are times when help is more terrifying. That was the case with the disciples. But the important thing is Jesus was going to be right there with them, even in the middle of the storm. Your goals seem unreachable. The Lord may require a major step of faith like Peter's. It may not make sense, but just remember, He's right there with you. And then we see that the Lord saves in verse 30 to 33. When Peter saw the wind boisterous, and he was afraid and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, "The Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched forth His hand and caught him, and said unto him, "O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?" And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. And then they that were in the ship came and worshipped Him, saying, "Of a truth thou art the Son of God." Well, Peter was actually walking on the water. Give him credit for that. But why did he sink? It's because his focus was no longer on the Lord, but on the wind and the waves. And the storm, probably the 11 back in the boat were not much help. And maybe they were telling Peter, "Watch out, there's a big one coming." But that's why he got his eyes off the Lord, and he saw the wind and the waves, and his faith wavered. That's why. There's something interesting about this. This is the first time in Matthew when any human confessed that Jesus is the Son of God. Now, before this, only demons understood. They confessed that He was the Son of God. But this is the first time a human being confessed, "You are the Son of God." And I have a feeling maybe that's why Jesus put them through such a hard night. He wanted to increase their faith and strengthen it. Question to ask yourself, my friends, are you concentrating on the wind and the waves or on the Lord? Peter made some spiritual progress on that lake. One day, after walking all night with no fish, Jesus said, "Cast your net into the deep water." And immediately they had a great catch of fish, and he discovered that he could trust the Lord on a boat in the daytime. But the Bible also tells us that one time they were crossing the sea at night in a storm, and the boat was sinking. Matthew chapter 8, when Jesus calmed the storm. And Peter learned that he could trust Jesus in a boat at night, sinking in a storm. And after this experience, though, he learned that he could be on a lake at night in a storm without a boat and still trust Jesus. I wonder, have you ever come to a place in your life where you just have to cry out, "Lord, save me"? That may be the entire reason for your storm and your problem. Maybe God is leading you into a greater step of faith. Well, think about that today, will you? Tomorrow, our reading is in Matthew chapter 15 to chapter 17. Be reading there, and I'll look forward to being back with you again soon. Have a great day, folks.